Deputy Holly Cairns.
At the outset, I want to give a very warm welcome to all of the survivors in the public gallery. We're here today because of your tireless efforts to get justice. Cairns, I welcome the state apology today for survivors of industrial and reformatory schools, as well as the clarification on criminal records. But I do want to talk about what it took to get here. Survivors of these nightmarish institutions, Mary Donovan, Mary Dunleavy-Green, Maurice Patton O'Connell and Miriam Moriarty Owens going on hunger strike for 51 days. Sleeping on the street outside Leinster House in the bitter cold and rain in the winter just to be listened to be taken seriously, to be heard. These are people who have already been repeatedly failed by the state, who were placed in these terrible institutions when they were just children, only to be beaten, starved and sexually abused, treated like prisoners and slaves, denied a childhood, denied compassion, denied care, denied everything a child needs. They were tortured for years by religious orders and a complicit state. The state knew this was happening and didn't stop it, didn't help, quite the opposite. It continued to send children to these awful places. Children who had suffered trauma and needed love and support were denied it. Instead, all they received was brutality and terror. Every waking minute was marked by fear, anxiety and horror. Lives were destroyed. And we are still, in this chamber, failing them today, decades later, forcing them to beg for supports that should be easy to access, forcing them to jump through hoops just to get the basics, making them feel like they have no other choice but to go on hunger strike. Survivors of depraved abuse forced to endure further trauma and pain, just to get what they should already be entitled to. Cairns, today's apology marks the 5th time the state has apologised for what children and women endured in institutions run by religious orders. Those apologies now stretch back nearly 30 years. They started in 1999 when Bertie Ahern apologised to children who had been abused in residential institutions. At the time, Mr Ahern lamented the, quote, piecemeal approach the state had taken to protecting children and commended the, quote, bravery of individual victims determined to tell their stories and seek justice. Back then, Taoiseach, you were Education Minister and Chair of a Cabinet subcommittee tasked with designing supports for victims. Since then, there have been apologies by a further 3 Taoiseach, Brian Cowan, Enda Kenny and yourself, Taoiseach, in 2021. And here we are again today, still forcing victims to go public, to advocate, to fight the state for recognition and services. Still taking a legalistic approach to redress in which the overriding priority is limiting access and eligibility. Once again, trying to protect the state finances rather than trying to protect victims. The redress scheme for the survivors of mother and baby homes is the perfect example of this, to limit support and services to as narrow a group as possible for entirely arbitrary reasons that have no scientific or logical basis, causing further pain and trauma to survivors who have already suffered so much in the process. The state didn't do this in the dim or distant past. It was a decision by the previous Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and Green Party government. You excluded children who had spent less than 6 months in one of these institutions and children who had been boarded out, even if those children had been forcibly separated from their mothers or illegally adopted or treated like slave labour and abused in the places that they were boarded out to. They got nothing. I hope that the brave people who went on hunger strike are not failed by this government too. I know that they feel angry and let down that supports they were promised have not materialised. Taoiseach, survivors being consulted about the apology 30 minutes beforehand and the dates of their coming and going from the institutions being wrong today is insulting, and it is disrespectful, and the very least they deserve today is respect. I hope this doesn't continue beyond today.